Welcome back once again to My Hero Academia Overanalyzed. Today's episode is Season 1, Episode 3, Roaring Muscles.
The world's most popular hero, All Might.
That's interesting because most of the time he's referred to as Japan's #1 hero, likely because that's where he ranks in the Billboard charts, but it does beg the question of if he is the world's most popular hero. This line would have you believe that, but the sub says #1. Likely referring to the charts again. But considering how much influence he has worldwide with Stars and Stripes, the United States is #1, being very openly inspired by him, he could very well be the most popular worldwide, even if this line specifically isn't true confirmation.
I deem you worthy of my power. My quirk is yours to inherit.
So, does All Might picking Izuku to wield One for All make sense? I think so. I've seen people argue that All Might is stupid for picking a random 14-year-old, but I think with All Might's current mindset, it makes perfect sense. He sees himself and Izuku, for starters, them both being born quirkless and wanting to be heroes despite that setback. Plus, Izuku acted, in All Might's words, like a true hero despite the fact that he is quirkless, something once again he did himself when he was younger. But I think the biggest factor here is the fact that All Might thinks All for One is dead. These are peaceful times where crime rates are down and villain attacks are nothing more than an inconvenience. Passing the torch of One for All down to All Might is less of a necessity and more so an opportunity to have someone usurp him. So why not give that opportunity to someone that wouldn't have had much of a chance otherwise? If All Might knew All for One was still around, I could see All Might not taking that chance, but in the context of the world as he knows it, I think it's perfectly logical, especially with Night Eye's prediction of All Might's demise drawing closer.
Journalists always guess my quirk is super strength or some kind of invulnerability. When people ask in interviews, I always make a joke and dodge the question.
It's interesting to me that All Might didn't just say super strength, which is essentially what One for All is to him. Hell, even Izuku put his quirk down as just super power and no one questioned it. If I was in his shoes, I wouldn't even allow it to be a debate if it was that big of a secret. Maybe he just doesn't like lying or something.
Yes, Wei. And you're next. I can give you my abilities.
His scar here doesn't have the purple coloring it did before, which I'd say was likely to make it easier to animate, but the wound is actually still here, so I don't know. I will say it's interesting to have him saying "you're next" as it shows his scar, almost kind of foreshadowing that Izuku will face the person who gave him that wound eventually. Also, him saying "you're next" is possibly a setup for when he says it after the fight with All for One, though that connection is lost in the dub since he doesn't say "you're next" after the fight in it.
The idea of passing on a quirk or inheriting it just doesn't make any sense to me. I've never heard anything like that before.
Are you seriously telling me this quirk nerd doesn't know at least the rumors of All for One and him being able to transfer quirks? Oh wait! He does!
In the blink of an eye, he became the leader of villains and ruled over Japan.
I've seen plenty of rumors about this online, sure, but...
Well, it said that he was wiped from the history books. It's still weird that Izuku thinks the possibility of transferring abilities is impossible, especially with him having heard the rumors before. Plus, because quirks are already genetic, it doesn't really feel like as much of a leap as Izuku's making it out to be here. Hell, we see in the series that even common people have the ability to affect quirks like Eraserhead and Monoma, though they can only do it temporarily.
I was on a long hunt for a worthy successor.
That line is kind of interesting just to think about. It's fair to assume that he started looking for a candidate right after his injury from the battle with All for One. It's surprising that it took him this long to find someone. Though, with how much of himself he sees in Izuku, it's not really hard to see why he chose him.
Seriously, you gotta stop crying so much if you want my quirk. Come on, kid.
Weird line change from All Might here to the dub, where in the dub he tells Izuku to stop crying, and in the sub he reaffirms that it's his choice to choose the power or not. I don't mind it, I just find the major line changes interesting. I feel like they were way more liberal with them early on in the series, though the "come on kid" feels a little bit out of character for him.
Receiving All Might's power turned out to be no easy task.
I really like the aspect of One for All where Izuku has to really work for it, beyond just proving himself to have the heart of a hero. And I'm not exclusively talking about this training montage either, though this is the start of that. He spends 10 months training his body just to be able to wield it, and I mean, we see how that goes the first time he uses it. This physical struggle of his powers is kind of played as his main arc throughout the story aside from his inspiration of others. He struggles, has setbacks, but has to work to control it. It's a good visual way of showing how much he does manage to go throughout the series. It's kind of reminiscent of Aang from Avatar in a way. They both spend the bulk of the series trying to master their abilities to achieve their main goal, and they both start off as explicitly morally good characters. Though once again, this doesn't mean that they don't have those emotional struggles as well. In both cases though, their characters would largely suffer from stagnation if they started the series being masters of their craft. That doesn't mean they'd be bad characters, just less interesting to watch ones. I'll go even more into it next episode when he actually uses the quirk, but I think it was really smart to make the quirk function the way it does because of how it ties into his character like this.
Assuming I'll be resting 2 days between each hard workout, then...
Whoa, it's his pencil holder from last episode. Super cool continuity. Though I do wonder if he actually got it back after it got blown away, or if he just happened to have a spare one.
Also, I'll need to make sure I'm hitting every muscle group between...
Unsurprising, but a good chunk of these students are ones from his homeroom class in the first episode. With the exception of maybe this one, I can't find an exact hair match there. I also like the detail of Bakugo being the only one not looking back at Izuku, either out of pettiness over his help with the sludge villain, or just because he's used to Izuku mumbling since they've known each other since they were kids. Oh my god, yes, another clock, finally! Well, luckily, this clock, despite being a little iffy on the hand placement, makes sense. It's around 2:25 a.m. They're wearing different uniforms here, which I believe indicates that it's turned from spring to summer. Cool detail. Then in a later scene, they've changed back into their original uniforms, which is a cool way of showing part of that passage of time. Good lord, the amount of upper body strength that Izuku would require to do this is absurd. All Might said earlier this episode that he weighs 550 pounds, which is insane. Izuku, please don't herniate a disc. Speaking from experience, it's not good. I like to quickly appreciate the sheer amount of outfits Izuku wears throughout this training montage. Wears a ton of different shirts and pants and stuff, which doesn't add a whole lot on the surface, but it does convey, again, a good passage of time, which is important when you're doing this long of a montage. Also, Izuku's shirts are very funny. He has a pajama shirt, a Y shirt, a shirt. His fashion sense is impeccable. Maybe I'm digging too deep into this, but it's a cool detail anyways. All Might being on a Segway here is an interesting contrast to later in the series after he decides to live. Him not running alongside Izuku and instead letting him run on his own is emblematic of All Might's current mindset. He thinks he's gonna die within the next year or so anyway, so who cares about doing some jogging. It may have been lucky coincidence, but I think this detail makes All Might's later scenes of him running a bit more impactful having seen him like this.
I don't just want into UA, I want to excel. I want to be like you!
So this is the first example of Izuku being inspired by All Might to a fault. He overworks himself on the expectation of wanting to go plus ultra, without taking into account what that means for his personal health, much like All Might does with him constantly pushing his time limits or refusing to retire despite his condition. It's interesting because while this could be considered a character flaw, the show doesn't consider it one. Yet. Clearly displayed as a positive thing here, with it playing triumphant music and All Might encouraging Izuku, though at least All Might does tell Izuku that he shouldn't be doing it. Later on in the show, though, it does reframe this admiration to be a character flaw. They're once again planting these small seeds that are going to be capitalized on in the future without you even realizing it.
Hey, holy crap, kid. You even cleaned up outside the area I told you to.
Once again, more evidence for my last point with their bad habits being encouraged by one another. They're almost too similar. This, again, is completely intentional, and really good character establishment for both of them.
Holy stinking super crap!
The line in the sub is, "Oh my goodness," which is far better in my opinion, though the dub line is admittedly kind of funny in an absurd way. But see what I mean about their more liberal use of script changes? This type of change would be torn up by the fandom if it was done in a modern episode.
I knew you had it in you, but this is beyond.
Plus ultra?
There's a difference between being lucky and deserving. One's an accident, the other a reward. Never get the two confused.
Not only is this just some cool advice, but it also directly refutes this weird idea that some people have that Izuku was just gifted this power. I don't know why people think that. I think the amount of Izuku hate juice got to their heads. But genuinely, it's a great speech. Seeing Izuku also being worried that he's still not worthy is fairly interesting. Once again, showing a lack of self-worth. Also, the hair pit is very good. I don't think it takes away from the speech at all. It's just funny. Though it does raise the question of how Yoichi passed it on to Kudo. They were awfully close, Huh? Sharing DNA?
You'll be late for the exam! Eat!
Feet imagery, but this time the shoes are off of him. Maybe symbolizing him leaving his quirkless status behind? I don't know. Cool visuals nonetheless. More fuel for Red Shoe Theory.
I was so worried about missing the exam that I didn't have a chance to test out my new power.
Honestly, kind of lucky he didn't, because if he did and broke his arm, he likely wouldn't have made it to the exam at all. But also, really, why didn't All Might give it to him the day before the exam?
I stopped you with my quirk.
Ochako puts her hands together here to release her quirk's effects, which wouldn't be noticed on a first watch through. Pretty cool. I like her introduction here in general. It's fairly simple, but it shows off her immediate desire to help people with her saving Izuku from falling, which is also probably foreshadowing for next episode, and showcases her kind and bubbly personality right away. Makes her pretty instantly likable. It's very funny to me that the only people who are drawn here are Zuko, Bakugo, and Ida. Like, why? It's very odd. I also like the joke of the audience's lack of call and response. Though if you're applying to UA, these students better get on that.
I listen to his radio show every day of the week. It's so crazy nuts that all the UA teachers are shut up.
I really like the dynamic between these two in these scenes. This may be more in line with how they normally act around each other rather than the over-the-top stuff in the first episode. This characterization is just more true to Bakugo in my opinion. This correction this early is also good for his character arc, because if he was still as mean as he was in the first episode here, then it would have been a much harder sell to redeem him over the course of their first year at UA. The time skip also helps with that.
Let's check out your targets. There are 3 types of foe villains in every battle center.
Here's a fairly big change from the manga to the anime. Well, in the anime, they make vague game terms and kind of just gamify the pre-existing robots. In the manga, Mario is used as a direct comparison instead. Also, while it's not absolute peak pixel art, I appreciate when shows actually take the time to make it look like pixel art and not use dreaded mixels.
Additionally, you with the unkempt hair. You've been muttering this entire time. Stop that.
So our introduction to Ida is interesting. Well, it does a fairly good job at showing off his more authoritarian personality. I do feel like it's a little bit too in that direction to be in line with his character later on. While he probably would be the kind of person to ask someone to stop muttering, I don't think Ida would call someone out by telling them that they have unkempt hair. However, this is right before an exam, so it could be excused by just saying he was under some stress. I simply like how the end music transitions into the credits. And with that, that's the end of the episode. Definitely not quite as much to pick apart this time, but still a fairly solid episode. I think it does suffer a little bit from the breakneck pace of the manga in this section, rushing to get through the training, and while they do a good job at conveying the passage of time, I think maybe having an episode fully dedicated to the 10 months of hell, as Zuko describes, may have been a little better for the overall pacing of the season. There's also a tad bit of mischaracterization here with Ida, but on the other hand, Bakugo's characterization was really well handled this episode, overall kind of leading it to balance out its problems with its strengths. But that'll be all for this episode. Thanks for joining me once again. Next time is Start Line. My boy will finally break his bones for the first time. I'll see you then.